afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the December 11th meeting of the Columbia Rotary Club. We're going to go ahead and get started with our national anthem with Jim Smithwick and Rusty the Pass.
Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, in this joyous season of the year when at least two of our spiritual traditions, Hanukkah and Christmas, focus on the shining of light, cause us to know once again that we are not called just to observe the light or to talk about the light or to have group discussions about the light, but we are called to be the light, so that the darkness of this world through us in word and in deed may be dispelled, and that your light of goodness and hope may abound upon the face of this earth. So now may the food that we eat give us strength, and the fellowship we enjoy give us encouragement to be the light and to do good in this world. For this is our prayer. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Bob. So I don't think Mike Gorman made it here yet, but most of y'all were able to speak with Robin out front, and she's going to come up and introduce visiting Rotarians and guests.
Thank you. It's kind of nice when you have two in a family in a Rotary Club, so that one has a duty and cannot be there, the other can substitute. Mike said he thought he would make it, but so obviously it's not. So we'll go ahead and welcome those with Rotarians, Rotarians with visitors. If you'll please stand. Introduce your visitor, please.
I'm Roy McCrory, and this is my guest, my wife, Frazier, 53 years. We're glad to have her here.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Hi, this is Kush Tata. I have my guest today, my good friend and colleague, Doug Harper. He's the Chief Information Officer for the South Carolina Department of Transportation.
Welcome,
My name is Steve Bryant. My guest today is Laura Lewis with System Tech. She heads up all of our business with the state of South Carolina.
Well, welcome. Happy to have you here this morning. We have another, we have one visiting Rotarian, Jim Hudson. I saw Jim come in. Jim, there he is. Jim, welcome. Happy to have you here. Have we overlooked anyone? Okay, then for a smooth transition, another wonderful responsibility I have here with Rotary, and that is to recognize Paul Harris Fellows. And that was a great, we already applauded today, and Roy McCrory. is to receive. And Roy, if you'll come forward, please. And if you'd like your wife to join you, that'd be wonderful. Yeah, both of you come up. We talk about the Paul Harris Foundation in different terms and the things that it does. And you remember that our district governor talked about it and said something that I have said to you all once before, and that is that the things that we do internationally, many of us are not able to participate physically, but our dollars can allow us to do that. And that's exactly what Roy, that he and others of you have done. The money that you give towards the Paul Harris does go to wonderful projects that you all are well aware of, particularly past polio. We have clean water, that was one of the big ones, and then with Melinda and Bill Gates with polio. So, you know, that wonderful projects, think about it. There are ways that you can give. And you can do like stock, you can do cash, of course, and probably take credit cards too. But just think about how you can, particularly in this area, that you can make a contribution to the Paul Harris. And it's my pleasure today, Harry, that we recognize Roy. And Roy is a multi-Paul Harris donor. And today he is receiving his pen, which is 3 sapphires that are for 4 years, for 4 recognitions. Roy, congratulations. Still here. If the other Paul Harris contributors, if you'll please stand, let's give you an applause. Please be recognized for your service. And Lord, thank you so much. We appreciate this and look forward to having at least 2 or 3 more in the next few weeks.
Congratulations. It's a big honor for all of us. We have. It was nice to see so many of us stand up in the room. If you will all, somebody at every desk or every table, if you'll hold up the cart. Those sound pretty empty actually, so let's get, okay, if it's all paper then that's good. Yeah, but let's try to put some money in those carts. And we're gonna, also, the yellow forms. Everybody should have gotten a yellow form when they got here, and that is to vote on next year's board. And we have one up here, John Durst, we've got one up here that needs to be collected. If you have a yellow form and you have not turned it in, please hold it up so that John can come and get it from you. And we're gonna try to get those counted before the end of the meeting, hopefully. And so that we'll know who will be our leadership team for next year. So we'll go ahead and get that done, and then I'm going to call Rex Wilson up here, and we're going to get started with some health and happiness. We are in for a treat today.
Now you talk about a tepid introduction. The Columbia Star has a picture of Kay Shaw, I know she's here, and Jim Reynolds ringing the bell. And I got to do that last week with my good friend Tom Jackson, and we were freezing to death, I want you to know. But we did it, and we were glad we did. Elliot Powell, some of you probably already know, had a heart attack, a heart procedure on Friday. A very long one, I understand, and he's home and he appreciates prayers, we all know. And Amanda Strickland is in the same situation for her mother, who's not doing well, and they would like prayer as well. These are quotes from a federal employee performance evaluations. Since my last report, he has reached rock bottom and started to dig. This employee should go far, and the sooner he starts, the better. This employee is depriving a village somewhere of an idiot. I thought I'd bring some Christmas cheer to you. Not long ago and far away, as Santa prepared for his annual trip, chaos erupted. 4 of his elves got sick. The training elves didn't produce the toys as fast as the regular ones. Santa was beginning to feel real pressure, being behind schedule as he was. And Ms. Claus told Santa that her mom was coming to visit. Santa said, "Oh, that's great." And then he went outside to harness the reindeer. He found 3 of them were about to give birth and 2 had jumped the fence. More stress to top it off. When he tried to load the sleigh, one of the boards cracked and the toy bag fell to the ground, scattering the toys everywhere. Totally frustrated, Santa went into the house for a cup of coffee. In his frustration, he dropped the coffee pot, breaking it into many pieces. And then when he went to get the broom, he found the mice had eaten the straw. Just then the doorbell rang and Santa stomped to the door and opened it to find a little angel with a great big Christmas tree. "Hi, Fat Man," the angel said. "Would you like to put this, where would you like to put this tree?" And that, my friends, is how the little angel came to be on top. My assumption that most of you was dead is wrong. This is an urgent message from the North Pole. Effective immediately, I will no longer be able to serve the southern portion of the United States on Christmas Eve. Due to the Earth's current overwhelming population, my contract has been renegotiated. Rest assured, southern children will be in the good hands with your local replacement, Bubba Claus, who happens to be my 3rd cousin. Bubba's side of the family is from the South Pole. My cousin shares my goal of delivering toys to good boys and girls. However, there are a few differences between us, please note. There is no longer any danger of a Grinch stealing your presents from Bubba Claus. He has a gun rack on his sleigh and a bumper sticker that reads, "These toys insured by Smith & Wesson." There's a second part to that, and I have misplaced it. So. That's all right. That's all right. You laugh where you can. Phyllis Diller has said, and I quote, "Housework will not kill you, but why would you take a chance?" Well, I like that. Joan Rivers said, "I hate housework. You make the bed, you do the dishes, and then 6 months later, you have to do it again." One from Jessica Tandy I know you're going to like. "When my husband is late for dinner, I know he's either having an affair or lying dead in the street. I always hope it's the street." All right, let's move on. You said to take longer. I think maybe not. And did you know the Louisiana State Department of Fish and Wildlife is advising hikers, hunters, fishermen, and golfers to take extra precaution and keep alert for alligators while in St. Tammany, Jefferson, and Orleans Parish. They advise people to wear noise-producing devices, such as little bells on their clothing, to alert, but not startle, the alligators unexpectedly. They advise the carrying of pepper spray in case of a gator encounter. It's also good to watch for fresh signs of alligator activity, be able to recognize the difference between a young alligator and an adult gator's droppings. Young alligator droppings are small, contain fish bones and possibly bird feathers. Large alligator droppings have little bells in them and smell like pepper. You know, it's death that turns you people on. I got these from Rusty. One night, a torrential rain soaked southern Louisiana. The next morning, the floodwaters came up to 6 feet in most houses. Ms. Boudreau was already sitting on her roof with her neighbor, Mrs. Thibodeau, waiting for help to come when Mrs. Thibodeau noticed a baseball cap floating near the house. She watched it float out into the front yard and float back to the house. Again and again, it kept floating away and coming back. Her curiosity got the best of her, and she asked Ms. Boudreau, "Did you see that there baseball cap floating away from the house back in the game? Ms. Boudreaux said, oh yeah, that's my husband. I told that coon he gotta cut the grass today come hell or high water. This is the last one, so get ready. Some linemen were busy putting up telephone poles through a farmer's fields. The farmer ordered them off the field. Whereupon they showed him a paper that gave them the right to plant poles wherever they pleased. Not long after that, a big and vicious bull charged the lineman. The old farmer sat on a fence nearby and yelled, show him your papers. That's it. He's not going to get any more.
Always a treat when you come and visit us, yes. So how many of you in this room have rung the bell for the Salvation Army already? I'm with Rex. I froze to death on Saturday. But one of the neatest things I think about the Salvation Army bell ringing campaign, and I know many of you in the room will agree with me, is, you know, on Facebook you have those little memories that pop up every single year, and so for the last 3 weeks, all of my bell ringing pictures have been popping up, and it's been kind of cool to see my kids grow up through this whole thing. My daughter was 3 the first year she was ringing the bell, and that was a tough year trying to keep her, you know, engaged for 2 hours at the Piggly Wiggly. But over that time, I've noticed my daughter likes to dance while she rings. So for those of you who are my Facebook friends, keep a lookout for my little ginger child doing a very horrible dance in front of greens. And thank you for all of you who have rung the bell for the Salvation Army. I was a team captain. It was difficult to get everybody. It has been a very tough year to get all of those slots filled, and that's worrisome. But the generosity that I saw just during my shift alone on Saturday, through the icicles that had formed on my face, it was pretty impressive to see how those kettles get filled up. So we're doing a really good thing. So thanks to everybody. Big round of applause. So I'm going to ask Don Mobley to come up here, and he's going to introduce our speaker for us.
Good afternoon. I'm Don Mobley with Scott & Company. I have one more guest that I want to introduce before I introduce our speaker, but Brian Keyes is sitting here. He's with our speaker, and Brian is the Deputy Secretary for Finance and Administration of the South Carolina Department of Transportation. Good to have you here, Brian. I have the honor today of introducing our guest speaker. Christy Hall has the honor and privilege as serving as the Secretary of Transportation for the state of South Carolina. In her capacity as head of the agency, she is responsible for directing and guiding the agency's planning, financial, legislative, maintenance, and operational efforts for the nation's 4th largest state-owned highway system. I did not know that we were the 4th largest. Secretary Hall rose through the ranks of the agency and has served in a variety of roles in both headquarters and field during her 20-plus career at SCDOT. She has just about done all at the agency, from design, communication, construction, to maintenance, to serving in several different leadership positions on the finance and engineering sides of the agency. Secretary Hall's unique experience has served the agency well so far, whether it was during the recent natural disasters. I don't know if y'all noticed Christy on TV a lot during the flood, but she was. During the recent natural disasters that struck our state, or the $5 billion financial plan that was crafted last year for our state's crumbling roads and bridges. Ms. Hall is a South Carolina native, a graduate of Clemson University, and a registered professional engineer. Please join me in welcoming Christy Hall.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. So one of my other titles is Master of Disasters. Whether it's the flood, the ice storm, the hurricanes, whatever, tanker fires, train derailments, just about everything that's been thrown at the DOT. I've had the honor and the privilege of being able to help craft our response. So I certainly appreciate that nice introduction, Don. Thank you. DOT folks in the room, Doug, Brian, appreciate you guys being here today. It means a lot to me for you to be here. I wanted to share with you guys today a little bit of an update on where DOT is heading for the next 10 years, especially in, excuse me, in light of the recent gas tax increase that was passed. So I want to share with you a little bit about the background for that, what our plan for utilization of it, and basically where we are today with it. So if you'll just give me a few minutes, I'll get a little bit of a slideshow for you. And of course, we do have the same information available on our website and detailed information for you as well available. So we titled this Rebuilding Our Roads, and that's basically what I view my mission as. So what the department's mission is over the next 10 years is not just planning, design, operation, and maintenance of the fourth largest state highway system in the nation, but we are truly at the point of rebuilding our infrastructure in the state, dealing with 30 years of backlog of deferred maintenance, all the way back to well before I started my career at the agency, to being able to finally develop, implement, and move forward with a plan to reconstruct our roads. So what I'd like to do is go back a little bit in time for you and describe to you, from my standpoint, what I saw the four biggest pieces of the puzzle that we were trying to solve going into the legislative session this past year. And those four big gaps for us on infrastructure is safety, pavement condition, our bridges, and much needed widening projects throughout the state. Looking at it from a dashboard perspective, as an agency leader, we have the highest fatality rate in the nation on our roads, period. The deadliest roads in the nation. And we've had that for a while. It's not just something we've earned last year or even the year before. And in particular, not only do we lead the nation on the deadliest roads across the state, but our roads outside of our urban areas and those rural areas of the state are also the deadliest in the nation. So #1 fatality rate. Now, I am a Clemson grad and I like being #1 in the football and other things like that, and leading, being DOT known for getting the job done, but this is a #1 rating that we don't like to have in the state. And as an agency head, I can tell you it's not something that I'm very proud of, knowing that my family and your families are driving on these deadliest roads in the nation. So we have the #1 fatality rate. We have about 750 bridges in our state that are structurally deficient. Now, they're safe to drive across, otherwise we would close them, but there is some structural element of concern on those bridges, whether it's the deck itself, as I'm sure you've seen them driving across some of those bridges, really bumpy and in bad shape, or the foundation coming up out of the water, or adjacent to the creek banks. Some element of those bridges across our state of an item of concern for our engineers. We're at least 10 years behind on our widening projects that are needed in this state. And working here in the Columbia area, I certainly see it every day, and I know you all see it as well as you drive back and forth throughout your daily travels. At least 10 years behind. And then 80% of our pavements are in some need of either a moderate or a major repair. 80%. Keep in mind, we're the fourth largest state highway system in the nation. Yet we've allowed our system to decay to the point of needing 80% of it needing to be either
moderately repaired or major reconstruction. So when I talk about rebuilding our highways, this is what I'm referring to. The pavement piece alone is an $11 billion, with a B, problem. $11 billion problem. Deferred maintenance liability on the DOT books today. $11 billion. Huge problem. So if you think about our budget annually at the DOT, it's roughly somewhere between, depending on the year, between 1.5 billion and 2 billion a year. And with that money, we do widening projects, safety projects, bridge projects, interstate projects, all those things that are necessary for the infrastructure. So put that in perspective to just that one element on pavements being an $11 billion problem. Kind of helps you understand very quickly why we were just basically trying our best to stop the decay of the system. All right, so in 2013, the General Assembly first started talking about more money for roads. And they infused some money into the DOT, which we moved forward with on resurfacing and a few bridge projects. And then in 2016, they moved forward with some additional money for the DOT, another great step moving forward. And then the monumental roads bill passed this past session. And the roads bill, basically what it'll do is it'll increase the state gas tax by 2 cents a year over a 6-year period for a total of 12 cents at the state level. Currently, the state gas tax is about 16 cents a gallon. So at full implementation, we're going to add another 12 cents on top of that. At the end of the day, at the end of that 6-year period, the DOT, what we're looking for and what we're planning for is an increase to our annual programs of about $800 million. $800 million a year increase, with the roads bill generating roughly about $600 million of that. So when we go back and look at those pieces of the puzzle, the problem then becomes, how do you take that $800 million and try to get the most that you can for it? Now, $800 million is a lot of money. It really is. But with road work and bridge work, it'll only go so far. And I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to do with those dollars. So here's our plan for the use of those funds. Our biggest issue, as I described to you before, was from an unfunded liability standpoint, is that big resurfacing issue that we've got in our state. And so what we want to do is we're going to dedicate roughly about half of the $800 million, half of the all-in number, to increasing our resurfacing programs. Our current resurfacing program, prior to the passage of the roads bill, was roughly about $400 million a year. So what we're saying is we want to again double our resurfacing program, phased in incrementally over time, up to a level, adding an additional 407 onto it. So we're going to be roughly somewhere between 700 to 800 million a year on resurfacing along paving projects in our state. Again, keep in mind, we've got that $11 billion problem we're trying to chip away at. In addition to resurfacing, we have a bridge program that we've launched to specifically target a certain section of our bridges, and I'll talk about that more in just a minute. So we're going to fund a bridge program out of the new funds as well. We have an aggressive interstate widening program proposed, where we want to widen a significant amount of interstates in our state, and I'll touch on exactly where in just a few minutes. But we plan to carve roughly about $160 million out of those, out of that $800 million, to deliver that program. And then we've designed a program specifically targeting what we call the worst of the worst roads when it comes to safety in our state. It's called the Rural Road Safety Program. And what we plan to do is to target about 5% of our road network, where roughly about 30% of our fatalities are happening. And our intentions are to selectively target that universe of roads, make safety improvements like shoulders, paint lines, reestablishing the right-of-way, adding rumble strips, signage, whatever safety features we can, in order to give the drivers every opportunity to stay on the road or recover if they happen to drift off the edge of the road. That's a brand new program, and we're going to fund that at about $50 million a year, every year, for as long as we possibly can to get that program going. And many of those roads are in this area. And then at the very tail end, there's something called additional priorities after the tax credit sunsets. How many of you knew there were actually 2 tax credits associated with the gas tax bill? Anybody? Nobody. Somebody? I got a winner. All right, there's 2 tax credits actually built into the gas tax increase. One tax credit is an education tax credit to help folks go to some of the technical schools in the state. And then there's another tax credit that deals with, it's called a vehicle safety maintenance tax credit, to basically give the taxpayer a tax credit available on your individual income tax forms for the state to enable you to deduct the lesser of either your increased costs due to the increased state gas tax or vehicle maintenance expenses. So myself, for example, if I were to calculate that the 2-cent increase cost me $16 a year in additional cost, and I went and bought a set of tires, and those tires cost $1,000, then I can deduct a $16 tax credit off of my income tax, off of my state income tax. And it's just a straight deduction right off. So look for that. It's not effective this tax year, but it'll be effective next tax year going forward. But that was part of the discussion to try to help offset some of the increased cost to the taxpayers. So that was part of the requirements from the General Assembly. So those are being funded either through the general fund or in the case of the vehicle safety credit, it's being funded directly out of the DOT. We're transferring funds for the next 5 to 6 years to fund that. And then that tax credit expires, and those dollars would stay with the DOT for more road and bridge projects. So that's what that tail end on this chart shows, $115 million basically returning to or staying with the DOT for road projects. So what are we getting for this investment? And this is a key item for the DOT, is tying a dollar invested to an expected outcome. And this is a new management philosophy for DOT. And I'd like to share with you basically what you're going to get, what we're all going to get for the investment that I just shared with you. Our plan is over the next 10 years to upgrade 1,000 miles of the worst roads in our rural areas across the state with regards to safety. So 1,000 miles upgraded. We plan to build 465 brand new bridges. And what we plan to do on the bridges is a two-pronged approach. We plan to address the structurally deficient bridges, or the bridges that have structural concerns on our high volume type roadways, our roads that are essential to our commerce in the state. In other words, if they were to be placed out of service, it would be a tremendous issue for us as individuals and as businesses. So we want to replace those bridges. And then we also want to replace something called load restricted bridges. And those bridges typically are in your suburban areas and in your rural communities. And those are the bridges that say you can't drive over this bridge if you have more than X number of axles, or if the weight of your vehicle is a certain amount. So coming from a rural area, I'm very familiar with those types of bridges because those are the bridges the school bus couldn't go across, or those are the bridges the fire trucks couldn't cross, or those are the bridges that normal 18-wheelers trying to make deliveries, or log trucks. The list goes on and on and on. Those types of bridges, we have about 350 in the state currently. Our plan is to completely eliminate all of those bridges over the next 10 years. So no more load restricted bridges in our state is our plan going forward. We plan to widen 140 miles of our interstate system. Again, we're at least 10 years behind of getting these projects started due to funding constraints. So we're finally able to get going on those. And then we're going to make progress to reverse the 30 years of neglect. We're going to make progress. Notice I'm not saying we're going to fix all the roads. I think if you do the math, I talked about the $11 billion problem and how much we're planning to invest. It doesn't take you long to figure out. It's going to take a while to recover the system, especially with regards to payments. This chart here basically shows you what to expect by network type on resurfacing projects. Today, our interstates are roughly about 2/3 in good condition from a pavement standpoint, not from a congestion standpoint, but strictly the driving surface. Our plan is to drive that number all the way up to more than 90% good. Significant investment on our interstate system. Our major roads, those are also called primary routes. You may know them as a US 601 or an SC6 in this area. Those roads actually carry the vast majority of all traffic in South Carolina every day. Actually about 30% more than the interstate system does. So very, very important to the movement of people and goods across our state. That network, for various reasons, we have allowed to decay to the point of being less than 1/4 of those roads are in good condition today. Yet, most of our people are driving on those roads. Our plan is to basically double the percent good, to drive it to more than 50% good between this year and 10 years from now. So major investment on that network, driving it up. And then the secondary roads, those are your smaller 2-lane type roadways in the state. Again, the same approach with the investment over a 10-year period, try to attain at least a doubling of percent good today. Now, if you'll notice on this chart, the only one that's closer to a state of good repair is going to be your interstate system. Everything else will still be in a state of recovery, and you can see that from these numbers. And along these lines, we did not necessarily wait for all the roads money to accumulate before we moved forward with projects. So I'm proud to tell you all today that since July 1st, which is when the roads bill, the new gas tax went into place, we've accumulated roughly about $84 million in revenues since July 1st. We have also released 924 roads for resurfacing against those dollars for 773 miles of additional resurfacing project that was enabled just from the gas tax passage. So we're putting the money out on the street and getting it to work as quickly as we can. Statewide, again, what our goal is to essentially double our resurfacing program over the next 5 to 6 years, replace 465 bridges, widen 140 miles of interstates, including the single largest infrastructure project in the history of the state of South Carolina. And I can't help myself, I have to call it Malfunction Junction, because I've known it that my entire career, and so do you all. I just can't get used to Carolina Crossroads for some reason, but so 140 miles of interstate, including that one project by itself. And that one project is actually a $1.5 billion project, estimated. About twice the size of the Ravenel Bridge in cost. Our plans are to go to contract with that by December 31st of 2019. So we're well on our way with that project. Again, that's a project that's been our top-ranked interstate project for well over 10 years, and we're just now able to get to that project. Just now able to get to it, thanks to the roads bill. Several other key projects leading in and out of the Columbia area will be approved. You've already seen some of the work on 77. We do plan a little bit of work on 26. The I-20 project is currently underway, as I'm sure you've seen it driving throughout the area. We have an aggressive plan to work on the existing 526 down in the Charleston area, and basically the 85 corridor from the Greenville area all the way up to the North Carolina state line. will be improved and widened. And all those projects were strategically selected in order to address some of the biggest bottlenecks that we have on our interstate system. Still short on meeting the total need. There's two large gaps on this list that I see, and I'm sure you probably are wondering as well, is I don't see any green, meaning an interstate widening project on I-95. So currently, we don't show any widening plan for I-95 currently. That project would probably, or a project on 95 would probably compete very well for some of those after the tax credit sunsets dollars. The other gap that I see is between Columbia and the Charleston area, widening of I-26. The continuation of that is not on this current plan. So that's an $800 million project by itself. And the little bit of work that we know that is needed on I-95 is about a $200 million project. So that's $1 billion in unmet interstate widening needs that we know today are needed. We also plan to upgrade, as I mentioned earlier, 1,000 miles of our worst of the worst roads when it comes to safety. So I'm sure you're curious as to what's coming to your neighborhood and what projects, especially on resurfacing, are our plans. I would encourage you to go visit our public portal. We have a very, very nice interactive project viewer where you can go in and it's mobile device ready. This screenshot actually on the very bottom right hand corner of the slide is from my cell phone of the Columbia region, looking at it, taking a little screenshot and uploading it. But it indicates all the resurfacing projects, the bridge projects, interstate widening projects, safety projects, basically any project that we have at the DOT that we're working on is loaded into this GIS-enabled system. And you can click on it and get a schedule, you can click on it and get a contact, so you've got a real person that you can talk to find out exactly what's going on and get an update. So if you have questions, I certainly encourage you to take a look at that. It's actually where I go a lot of times to find out project information the fastest, believe it or not. Transparency and accountability is also something that's a cornerstone to this new leadership team's initiatives. We've been trying to find ways to simplify what is at times an overly complicated processes and budget picture of how we utilize the resources. So we're trying to, as I call it, de-engineer some of our descriptions, and I can say that because I'm an engineer. The budget pie, for example, which is shown on this chart here on the upper right-hand corner, is much easier to read, although it's a little small in size here, but it makes sense when you read it because it's clearly broken into things like maintenance, widening projects, day-to-day maintenance, meaning like mowing and litter pickup, those type of things, project management, general administration, debt, those type of things. Much easier to read than a 31 slice pie that we had before. So trying to produce meaningful information out of mountains of data is something that we're working on very diligently. We're also looking at producing management reports so that you have the ability to go in to see how is your DOT doing, how are we, what's our success rate on delivery of projects on time and on budget, providing that information as well. And then who are we doing contracts with, providing that information as well so you can see where those dollars are being spent. So I've covered a lot of information in a very short period of time, and we'll be more than happy to take a few questions if there are some. Look at all that. Yes, sir.
Two quick questions.
Yes.
One, why are we the fourth largest state-owned road system? And secondly, on the safety issue, how much of that is a roads issue and how much of that is an underfunding Department of Public Safety?
Two very good questions. So the answer to the first one, which is how did we get to be the fourth largest state highway system in the nation? It's actually something that's very interesting to look into, and it's what I've found is that most of the southern states have larger transportation systems versus some of our other states. And in South Carolina in particular, it really dates back to something, a law that was passed called the Beltline Act. And what that enabled was a statewide elected official or state elected official to call up the DOT director at the time and say, add this road to the state system, with the assumption being that the state would own, operate, and maintain it. And so when that law was passed back in the 60s, basically the system really grew. And this whole notion of farm to market, opening up the rural areas for development, all that happened at about the same time. So it was somewhat of spurred along trying to increase economic development, but also trying to make sure that locals are being represented at the state level. All right, and then your second question about safety. Safety is not just a DOT issue. It's enforcement, it's education, it's engineering, which is where DOT comes into place. And I believe it's everyone else, meaning the driver's personal responsibility as well. All those issues play a role in safety on our highways. For us at the DOT, we're focused on what engineering solutions we can develop to try to keep the cars on the road and give the driver every opportunity to correct to get back on the road. DPS, I think there's been a lot of arguments about their funding levels and what their priorities have been, and I really can't speak about DPS because I'm obviously not their director, but I certainly can say that we do a lot of coordination with them, and we advise them based on our analysis of the data what corridors they may want to increase enforcement based on our data analysis. Yes, sir.
You said 140 miles of widening roads, which sounds like nothing to me. I would bet it'd be 140 miles from Malfunction Junction, just if you're going to widen out 20, widen out 26 a bit. Am I wrong?
So 140 miles, our total interstate system is about 850 miles in total. So 8%, certainly not half or anything like that, which really, from our standpoint, looking at it, the gaps that are needed on the interstate widening are that gap in between Columbia and Charleston on 26, and then 95 coming up from the Georgia border are the biggest existing gaps that we see today. Now, we're always playing catch up, the whole development at Volvo and all those things that are happening down in the Berkeley, Dorchester area. We certainly had no visibility to that. None of us did prior to just a couple of years ago. So the projects that we're doing today should have been done at least 10 years ago, and we're doing our best to try to keep up. But 140 miles is all we're going to be able to do with the existing dollars. Yes, sir.
Christy, are you hearing anything from the feds? You know, they've talked about, infrastructure bill. Can you give us any update on where we think that might be?
Yeah, be glad to. We spent actually a good bit of time in Washington talking to the president's policy advisors, U.S. DOT officials, other state DOTs. And it's our understanding from the White House officials, the president's interest in infrastructure, he wants to obviously increase investment, but what he's looking for is trying to bring the private sector in more on investment. And so they're very interested in things called public-private partnerships, projects that are attractive to the private side to come in and invest versus the federal government investing significant additional dollars. One of the examples that I like to use is the current federal funding ratios are more like 80% federal and then 20% non-federal, typically a state DOT matching dollar. What they're looking to do on any additional new investments would be to flip that ratio around and put 20% federal, bringing in 80% non-federal, whether it's additional state dollars, whether it's private dollars coming in, and those type of things. But that's their interest is $1 trillion program, going forward, with roughly about 80% being non-federal. South Carolina is well positioned on something like that, in particular with the gas tax increase that was passed. And that's basically my message to DC anytime I talk is, hey, we're getting ready to make, even though we know it's not everything that we want to see happen on the interstate, we're getting ready to make a major investment of state funds on the interstate system. We need to get some credit for doing that through the federal highway process. So we're trying to make our case, and hopefully
So 95 could happen a lot earlier if something happened in Washington to push that along.
certainly, it could. I think there was a question over here.
Yeah, you mentioned the malfunction junction project, and you said December 2019 is when contracts would get
Yes,
done? So you're saying construction is even beyond that?
yes.
So what is the timetable, your estimated timetable of when construction would actually start on that project?
It'd be a complete guess at this point in time, to speculate, because the way the process works on a big project like that is, we do what's called 30% final plans ourselves. And then we basically push those plans out to the private industry to get them to come on board with innovations and other strategies to accelerate delivery and minimize costs. So that remaining design effort typically happens after we sign the contract. Then they've got to complete design plans. If their vision's a little different than our vision, there may be some additional federal paperwork, things like that, public involvement. So I wouldn't expect it to be any sooner than 2020. It could possibly be late 2020, early 2021, but we have a very, very, very good website set up for that project, and I would encourage you to go out there and stay tuned to that and sign up for all the updates. All right, last question, and then I'll be more than happy to stick around for a few minutes afterwards.
Let me ask you,
Oh, yes, sir.
your Department of Transportation, what can you do about the trains in Columbia? Can't you get them ability to switch in yard to Calhoun County? And do you have more trouble with potholes or politicians?
Next question. Thank you all so much. I appreciate the time to be here today.
The question that everyone in this room wanted to know: how often do we start late because of trains? Christy, thank you so much for all that you're doing. We enjoyed that. I'm going to go ahead and ask President-elect Stephen Creech to come up, and he'll tell us about next week and introduce our new board.
Thank you, President Kerry. I'm very excited too. I heard her mumble that under her breath. It's getting close. Thank you for coming today to vote for these our new board for 2018-2019. The last couple of weeks, I've been tracking down 14 people that have been willing to serve, and that's not easy to do. So let's give a round of applause to everybody who wanted to. At this time, I'm going to call out the 7 board members for 2018-2019. If you would please stand, and we'll hold our applause until the end. Louisa Campbell, Henry Clay, Catherine Davis, Adam Jordan, Beth Irick, Randolph Shives, and Glenn Ward. Congratulations. I want to remind everybody who will be on the new board, we're going to be meeting next Monday at 11:45, and that is to elect the new president-elect who will follow me. And so please come at 11:45 next week. We'll meet right out here in the hallway. And next week, our speaker is South Carolina Adjutant General Bob Livingston. So please come and bring a guest, and we look forward to seeing you. Thanks.
Congratulations, everybody. Have a great week. We're going to go ahead and end. Rusty's gone, so we won't be singing today. Have a great week.